Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Backchat. I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie.
Hello.
And together we are ThinkerThemer, and in this series we count down usually our top 10 crowdfunding campaigns that we're most excited about from the previous fortnight. What are you doing interpretive dance?
I'm interpreting what you're saying. So usually it's 10.
Usually it's 10, but this fortnight it's going to be another top 5. We're going to do that the whole time. It's going to be another top 5 because there are just not enough games hitting crowdfunding platforms at the moment that we personally are excited about. Yeah. So we're going to take you through our top 5. So let's get started with our number 5, Pagan Fate of Roanoke.
Nice.
And now this is an interesting one because technically it was out and available from last fortnight's Backchat. But at the time we hadn't had a chance to play the game. And if you watched last week's small talk episode, you would see that in our news segment of This Just In, it was one of the games that just got delivered to us. So we have since had an opportunity to get it to the table, albeit quite quickly, before recording this. And so basically on Kickstarter at the moment, they are offering the second edition print run. Well, it's not a second edition, but it's the second print run of Pagan. And they're offering everything that they offered in the first Kickstarter, but they've also made a couple of fixes to some cards that apparently were not super clear, as well as the rulebook, which again, they were just clarifying some of the examples. And I'm glad to hear that they've done that because there were a couple of examples in the rulebook that we got a little bit lost on. So I'm very happy to hear that. I'm also happy that it's not really fixing any mistakes because obviously we already have the game and the new cards are just simply making it clearer. But what is this game about? In this game, you're playing as either the witch hunter or the witch. And this is a deduction game. It's a 2-player only game, although I will note that in the new Kickstarter, they're working towards unlocking a 3 or 4 and 4-player variant. But at its heart, this game is 2-player, and you both have an asymmetric characters, and you both have a unique deck of 50 cards. And what you're going to be doing is you're, as the witch, you're trying to obscure who the actual witch is out of a series of suspects that are laid out between the 2 players. As the hunter, of course, you are out there trying to gain information to work out who the witch is, where is the witch's true identity. And so you're going to be able to work your way through a pile of cards that gives you clues to tell you who the witch is not in order for you to deduce down who the witch actually is. And what's really interesting is the witch, of course, wants to stop the hunter from doing their job.
Ultimately, so we can do, I say we because I usually play as the witch, so that I can do the ritual, which I need to kind of collect enough secrets.
But the interesting part about that mechanically is that in order to build up enough secrets in order to perform the ritual and ultimately win the game, the witch is going to have to give away some information about who the actual witch is because they need to build up the secrets which are visible on top of the card to the hunter.
Little tokens.
Tokens. So the hunter is going to get some clues as to maybe where the witch is kind of funneling all their efforts. And so the witch has to obscure that by placing more secrets across a broader range of characters.
Play it cool. Don't be too obvious.
Don't be too obvious, but also can slow the hunter down by performing different rituals, not rituals, what's the cards like off to the side that stop the hunter.
I can't remember the actual name, but it's kind of like a spell. A spell.
But also there are a lot of cards that you both have to really help or hinder, help yourself or hinder the other person. This game is a very interesting one. We of course, we haven't played it enough to do a full review of it yet. We'll save that for a small talk. But I will say that it is quite long to begin with. So when you're getting your head wrapped around this game, there's a lot to think about, and it's described in very thematic terms, the rule book. And actually, you both have very similar actions, but they're called different things, and they all have different icons. And one thing that is making this game harder for us to get into, I would say, is the iconography and the font. Not my favorite, kind of quite small font, quite like lots of different icons that you've got to get to know.
The icons are very small as well. Sometimes the shape is hard to make apart. Maybe we're just old. Maybe that's part of it.
Could be it.
We don't really have the best of eyesight.
Yeah, but I do feel as though those things hold this game back, because I'm feeling like what's underneath is actually a very clever game mechanically. And it's been likened to Android Netrunner. So if you are a fan of that game, it has apparently the same kind of feel and build throughout the game. So in terms of going in on this Kickstarter, I know that for the Australians, the postage is very expensive. It's, I think, €35 postage, and it was the first time around quite expensive as well. So I do remember that. But it is a really interesting game, yet to feel like whether it's a must back or not. It's a little bit lower in our rankings simply because we already own the game. If you go in on the Kickstarter, I believe it's €45 for the base game. And if you go in now, of course, you get this lovely box of all of the unlocked Kickstarter extras from the previous campaign and from this campaign. And the goodies are worth it. The wooden tokens are really beautiful. All of the stuff, the extra things that came with the previous pack when I went all in, of course, and got the playmat. There's a new playmat now, alternative art, as well as like all of the additional cards. Because the other thing about this game is that ultimately it is a deck construction game where you will be building your deck before you get started. However, I will say that that's a really minor element of this game, because at the game itself, the base game, comes with pre-constructed decks for both players, and even the expansion comes with new pre-constructed decks for both players, so you don't have to get into the mixing and matching and constructing your own deck if you don't want to. But that is basically everything I have to say about that. I don't think you need to go in on this if you already have everything from the previous Kickstarter. It doesn't sound like the cards, the corrected or rephrased cards, are going to make too much of a difference. And there's two other things. The new wood tokens are slightly more fancy because they've got the like the question mark and things etched out of the wooden tokens. So it's like, okay, I think I can live with the ones we have. And the other thing, though, is they swapped the influence dial to influence wooden tokens. Now, I think that's just a preference thing. The little dial is a little tight to turn, and I don't mind it, but I do think that it can be obscured if you're worried about your opponent cheating. It is better to be able to see them pay their influence and that they have no influence left over.
It's easy to like bump them and go, oh, I was kind of in between two numbers. And it's another element that's actually quite small as a...
I agree, but I feel like the dial is fine and more sustainable. So there is that. And that is our number 5. Go and check it out if it sounds like something that interests you. Pagan Fate of Roanoke.
And our number 4 is a game called Drop Bears. Now, Drop Bears comes from Australia, not just Australia, from right here, Melbourne, Australia. Now, Drop Bears, if you're not familiar, are the mythological creature that all tourists or new arrivals to Australia are introduced to as you need to watch out for the drop bears. Like the what? There's bears in the trees and they'll jump in the middle of the night and catch you. I was told that when I arrived in Australia, that was never something that people did to me. So I felt like I was pretty
safe.
I was always sort of naively safe. But now that I have been introduced to the actual drop bears through this game, I am terrified. I am terrified that they might actually be real. So I'll talk about the game. In Drop Bears, we are a group of campers that for some reason we've gotten lost in the Aussie bush. Not a good thing to do. The Aussie bush is no joke. And all we have to do is survive the night. So just make it through from dusk till dawn. As we're going to be doing that, we're going to be exploring and going further into the bush. And the way we do that is we actually have these little tiles, sort of hexagonal tiles, that are going to be representing the areas that we're exploring and the different areas that we're coming across. As we're doing that, what will happen is we'll have our turn where we kind of walk around. It's cooperative, I should say, which immediately took Amy out of the out of the game. But as we're doing that, after we have our round, the drop bears have their turn because they've been hearing us rustling around. So this is essentially our turn, their turn. Every time their turn is upon us, it's quite literally upon us. These drop bears are going to jump and attack us in order, depending on how many campers we have out. it's one of those games that it's really just, it's a survival game. It is meant to be, obviously, it's a cooperative game. You can also play it solo. It's got a beautiful, it's like a, well, beautiful, horrifying, but pretty cool table presence, because you've got the, well, and again, I actually got a chance to play it, but I got to play with the prototype, and even at a prototype level, I actually was quite impressed with like the little wooden tokens that they had, and even just the cardboard tree that holds all the tiles.
Tree.
Yeah, that was really cool. And the drop bears themselves, they're the miniatures are horrifying. They're
really terrifying.
Yeah.
And I love that one of them is called Blinky,
Yeah.
which is a reference to Blinky Bill,
Yeah.
who is the cutest cartoon koala.
and the friendliest sort of like kids show.
Yeah.
So there's so many cool little Aussie nods in this game, because as you're kind of exploring the bush and trying to survive, every incoming round of drop bears, there's a lot of utility cards that you're coming across, which are essentially your life-saving cards and equipment that you're able to use to either heal wounds or give you kind of health points or reduce your panic. That's the other thing. Your characters have a double track of both their health, depending on the wounds that they're getting, but also their heart rate, like their heartbeat. And so if your heartbeat gets to a certain point, it triggers a panic. And so when you're in a panic, what happens is you're going to be rolling the die, and then every tile has numbers on each of the sides, and then that die will determine which direction you run away in a panic. Mm-hmm. The problem when you're running away in a panic is you're uncovering terrain or new areas, and there's going to be things where, for example, there might be hazards that if you're just encountering them in a normal speed, there's no issue, but if you're running through, they're actually going to cause you additional damage. So overall, this game is one of those, survival, relentless type thing. It does feel very punishing. It does feel very, because not only do you have to survive the drop bear attacks, by the end of the game or by daybreak, you also need to have collected enough survival points. So it's not just a survival element, there's also kind of like this tracker of points that you need to have enough of by the end of it. But the temptation is that's exactly what you can use to sort of mitigate some of the drop bear attacks. Mm-hmm. So you're like, do I use it? Am I going to not have enough by the end of the game? So there's a lot of those tensions. I think overall, it's probably not a game for me just from a genre point of view. Like I don't tend to resonate with like horror and that sort of thing. But if that is something that you enjoy, definitely I would say it's something that's worth checking out.
Yeah, and it is by local Melbourne designer Matthew Aslan, who also had the game prior to this, Ratcatcher, which was a big hit from the solo community. And you have had a chance to play that with Matt. And of course this follow-up game as well. So I'll just drop in and say that, for me, this obviously drop into the Drop Bears conversation.
Drop in, like a drop bear.
But this isn't a game for me just because it's co-op, and the horror is, if you watch regularly, you'll know I do not enjoy anything too scary. Yeah. But I did love the look of the miniatures, and I would like to paint those miniatures. They look very cool. Yeah. But the game itself is 79 Australian dollars. So I don't know, that's like $2 American. Just kidding. I think it's about 55 American dollars. Unfortunately, the shipping is the most expensive to Australia, which is a shame because, Australian games, we like to see cheap Australian shipping, but understand because the games are not made here generally. So we still have to cop those high Australian shipping fees.
Yeah, and it's a big box as well. Like at least, obviously I had a prototype, but it's not like a little tiny thing. So.
Yeah. So if this game does sound like one for you, go and check it out. That is our number 4, Drop Bears. Our number 3 is a pair of games from Queen Games called Helsinki and Copenhagen. Now, Helsinki is a new game, which is a deluxe edition that you can get through this campaign. Copenhagen is a game that already exists, and but now you can pick up this deluxe edition of that game as well. They are both polyomino tile laying games, and Copenhagen's been around for a little while, and you can certainly see that Helsinki is an evolution of that game to make it a bit more complex, a bit more meaty and thinky for, I guess, gamers that prefer a heavier game, because Copenhagen, the original, if you don't know about that game, it's very much a Tetris style game where you will be collecting cards of different suits or colors that you'll be able to trade in for polyomino tiles to then put into your player board, which looks like a Tetris grid, and you'll be trying to create lines, completed lines, both vertically and horizontally, to score points. And there are a couple of other things along the way. There are these bonus tiles that can give you powerful abilities that you can use along the way to help yourself. And also you're going to be trying to link as many windows next to each other. So you're going to be manipulating the way the tiles fall so that you can have full lines of windows that are going to give you more points. Now, the evolution of that game is Helsinki, and this introduces an interesting new player board where you're going to be, central board, where you're going to be moving your meeples around the outside. And instead of just choosing a card and choosing an adjacent card, you actually have to land between two cards and take both adjacent cards. So slightly different. But it does mean that you can kind of plan ahead, and it also restricts down your options because you're only allowed to move 1 to 3 steps forward. So you're trying to work out how far can my opponent move, how far can I move, and what's going to be available to me on my next turn. But it works in a similar way in that you are drafting the cards into your hand, but trading them in for polyomino pieces is a little bit harder because in this game, you don't just trade in 3 purple cards to get a 3 purple piece. You need to have the 3 purple cards, but also the purple card that has the number 3 on it. So it's a little bit more complex in terms of being able to collect those polyomino tiles. And then the other element that's really interesting about this game is that little rondelle that you're going around and collecting pieces also dictates the way in which the piece is going to slide into your puzzle. So instead of just being top down, falling like a Tetris piece, it's going to be coming in from the sides or going from the top or the bottom. And the piece has to connect with something, so it can't move straight through the puzzle board. So you're going to, I feel as though it's going to be a much more complex puzzle, working out where you need to be on the board in order to collect cards, but also where you need to be on the board in order to work out where those pieces are going to enter the puzzle. So that to me seems really interesting. The deluxe edition of both of these games gives you acrylic puzzle tile pieces. So that's why you might go in on this Kickstarter, because I believe it's the only way to get the deluxe edition of this game. Otherwise, all of the pieces are cardboard. And even though this is an evolution of the original Copenhagen game, it still doesn't feel super heavy. Obviously, we haven't played it, but from watching, it still feels like a game that's kind of a bit cruisy, a nice like puzzle to chip away.
I enjoy this concept of the Tetris, but depending on where you are determines which side the piece is going to be sliding in from. So I think that's a nice little touch. And thematically, you're technically building pavilions to protect so that the pedestrians can be protected from the rain. Just FYI.
Just
putting it in there. Just,
what does it mean thematically that they're coming in from the sides?
I have no idea. That bit, maybe it's just like you're like beep, beep, bringing in the crane, and it's like, well, if we can't fit it, then this is where it ends. Like it's gonna be, you're not building it there. I don't know, maybe I'm not familiar with the economy there. I don't know, maybe they have to manufacture things somewhere else and bring them already made, and so you have to just Tetris style.
I think you're giving the game a lot of credit here thematically. But you do get little pavilion rooftops that then get placed on top of the pieces.
Bonus points,
There's also other little, I think it's shields that you can collect along the way that unlock certain abilities that you can do, kind of like the tiles in the original Copenhagen game. So yeah, it is a build on Copenhagen. Again, only available the deluxe edition from the Kickstarter. I believe the game is, I forgot off the top of my head, 87 Australian dollars for the regular edition. If you want to get the deluxe edition, $109. I would recommend maybe waiting until retail if you're just going to get the regular edition, because shipping is, as usual, quite expensive. Queen Games usually has quite expensive shipping to Australia. It's $35 US to get it here. So kind of expensive, but if you're really into these games or you really love Copenhagen, then go and check this out. It is our number 3 Helsinki and Copenhagen Deluxe.
Our number 2 is a game called Stonewall Uprising. This is a game, a 2-player game, about the fight for gay civil rights. So obviously very near and dear to our hearts. And so in this 2-player game, it's asymmetric. So one person is going to be playing as the gay civil rights movement, trying to kind of forward or bring the cause forward and all of those rights to the fore.
Called Pride.
Pride. And then the other person will be playing as the man, or the kind of institution that's trying to suppress that and make sure that that doesn't happen.
Now, the way that this game is played is each player is going to be playing a card out of their hand on their turn, which is going to influence 3 trackers that are on the center board. And you want to try and influence the trackers to be more towards your side of the movement, because if you can get them far enough along the tracker, they're going to trigger events. And these events are based on real life events that happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s during the gay civil rights movement. Ultimately, you win as the man if you demoralize 10 people. You win as Pride if you're able to exceed the sum on a series of dice, exceed the sum of the Overton window. Now, the Overton window is this concept of what the public is willing to accept and reject in public discord or policy. And so the game, as it evolves, that window or that sum is going to be changing, and then you of course are trying to ensure that you can exceed that with your total sum of dice that you're going to be collecting along the way. Now, it was not easy to work out how the game played from the campaign. I wish it was a little easier in the campaign, but there's been a lot of discussion about this game, about what it would be like to play as the man. And I will say a couple of things. One is they introduced a solo mode so that you don't have to play as the man. You can just play as Pride and go up against the man and try and win that way. So no one has to play as the man. The other thing is, what I thought was an interesting choice as well, is that they made the man very abstract and dehumanized. So yes, it's a horrible character to play, and it's meant to be, and it's meant to feel awful, and you're meant to be doing these awful things because it's meant to be educational about how awful it was. But it doesn't have any people associated with it. Whereas the Pride deck is full of all of the activists and people that continued pushing for gay rights to really celebrate those people in this game. So that's a kind of interesting way of addressing that component of the game. I still personally would not like to play as the man, and it's questionable as to whether I would enjoy playing as Pride. I find even in the little text that I read, I find elements of it a little bit triggering, just growing up queer and having to still face some of those things, today. And of course, there's still a lot of work to be done. For me, I appreciate the game. I appreciate what it's here trying to do. I think it's fabulous that this be represented.
Absolutely,
but I'm not sure it's just a game that I want to sit down and play, unfortunately, because I think it's really great. So I'm a bit torn about it, and particularly because also there's, an AIDS death tracker in it. There's lots of really, if you are queer, that there are some triggering elements in there.
It would be a tough kind of game to play. And so it'd be more of I feel like definitely be more of an educational
There's teachable moments in there for sure.
Than a fun, lighthearted or game.
So it would be interesting, and even if you're playing it solo, to lose under those conditions as well, I'm not sure. You have to obviously go in knowing what you're getting into, but I certainly, it's really nice to see the Pride elements and just the all of the work that it took to stand up against such a big, powerful the man. Also in this game, I should say that when you lose, it doesn't mean that, gay rights went out the window. It just means that the man was able to slow those rights down. And I like that they did that in the game, signaling that change is inevitable, because that is a much more positive way to leave the game, even if you do lose against the man. So interesting. Unfortunately, it's not being offered in Australia, so they're only mailing to I believe the US and Canada, and there's an option to get it through a third party for Europe, but at this current time of filming, there's no option to get it in Australia. Interesting game concept. If you back it now, I believe you can also get one of the limited edition kind of covers, which has different elements of pride flags on there, which is pretty cool. Go and check that out. That is our number 2 Stonewall Uprising.
And our number 1 campaign for this fortnight is the Joey Games launch, which is actually Meredith and Phil Walker-Harding, who have now launched an Aussie, Australian-based game company. If you don't know Phil Walker-Harding, very well-renowned designer of games like Sushi Go.
And Barron Park.
Yeah, Barron Park.
Just
it's
a few
couple
little
of
games.
little games. You may not have heard of it. Yeah. So now they're actually launching a publishing company in Australia, and this is the first 3 games that are going to kind of get things
We just
going.
talk about the name of the publishing house, Joey Games. Now,
Joey Games.
Joey is very near and dear to our hearts because if you're watching the channel, you probably know that our channel membership we refer to as our Joey fam, and Joey's are our channel members, and we love them very dearly. It actually says Joey fam up on the wall over there. So
no relation, but still relation, because Joey just refers to a baby kangaroo.
Yes.
So that's why.
And perfect for this because this series of games is aimed to get, aimed at more children, to get
families
kids
playing,
and parents playing together. And so perfect name choice. Love it. Very Australian as well.
So I'll talk about the 3 games that are being launched. They're all so adorable. I love the aesthetic that they've gone with these games. But again, and they're all trying to celebrate or highlight an element of Australian life or flora, fauna, culture. And so the games are, the first one is Busy Beaks, which is about birds. So a lot of the Australian birds are featured. It's really a fairly straightforward set collection game with cards, but the cool thing about it is obviously every bird, you're trying to kind of get 5 of the same type of bird, but out of all of the birds that are available, you start the game with, I believe it's like 7. You kind of pick
you construct the starting deck, basically.
And so that'll determine the type of actions that will be part of that game. So every bird type has their own action type. So that's, and again, it looks like a fairly straightforward. The artwork is just so stunning.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. So I think this is one that I saw and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to get this for my friend who's just like absolutely obsessed with bird watching. And, also because he's in Australia, so it'll be very perfect for that. It is, however, a little bit light. So all these games are obviously meant to be kind of more kid-friendly, family-friendly. So it's probably going to be a bit on the light side for us. The second game is Pass the Party Food, which is all about Australian party food as well. This one's interesting because this is a co-op game where you're trying to kind of eat the most food and or speed up this food eating track and outrun your dog. So I believe it's Ziggy the dog is also going to be eating at the same time. So that's why it's co-op. We're trying to somehow eat more than the dog. You should always eat more than the dog, particularly collectively at a party. If your dog is eating more than all of you, that would be concerning.
Especially these foods.
Most of these foods are not going to be dog friendly as well.
A couple of highlights of the foods, just speaking as the resident Australian. One is a biscuit, little known biscuit by Arnott. It's called the Hundreds and Thousands. And if you haven't heard of Hundreds and Thousands, they are a very Australian sprinkle. What you would refer to colored, as, the sprinkles that you put on top of icing and things. Yeah. But we famously also put Hundreds and Thousands on white bread with butter, and that is called fairy bread, and that is also covered off in this game.
It is.
And there's a lamington. So a lamington is a sponge cake that has jam in the center and is wrapped in chocolate and coconut.
Yeah.
So that is a really famous Australian dish as well.
Scones are also in it.
Scones with jam and cream.
So in terms of how the game plays, though, it's going to be one of these games where you're pulling out 3 tiles and then you're deciding which one to keep and which one to give to the person on your left, which one to give to the person on your right, and you're going to be kind of trying to tally out or keep track of how the tracks, their individual tracks are going. Because as soon as you manage to get the full set, then you eat that, and then you move up the eating points track again, trying to beat Ziggy, the
Super
dog.
cute.
Very, very cute. The third game is called Scribbly Gum, and so this one is about the baby moths that eat away at the bark of gum trees, and so they actually create. And I'd always kind of wondered.
Did not know.
I know. I'd always wondered, what caused those shapes, because they're really squiggly. Like they are pretty kind of cool. And so it's baby moths
teaching children and Amy's
and Maggies of the world.
Everywhere.
Well, there you go. And so this is actually a competitive roll and write. So in this one, you're going to start in the middle with your baby moth, and then there's these tile cards that define tile, what would you call them? Kind of like movement tiles, I guess, that define which direction your moth can eat its way next. And so you're going to try to be collecting, I believe, and I can't remember. It's really set collection. I believe it's like a gum nut, a leaf, and a gum blossom. That's it. And every time you get those 3 sets, you get to kind of score some points. So again, it's another kind of set collection.
Yeah, all
type.
3 of the games are set collection, but all in slightly different ways, and they're all super cute.
Yeah, this one can be also leveled up with like almost achievements of shapes that you want to be able to achieve by the end of the game. So so it's got a bit more difficulty that you can add into it.
And what I really like to see, because this obviously is a new publisher, I really appreciate all of the effort that has gone into creating these games sustainably, and also giving back. So they are very forward in the campaign and on their website, talking about the things that or the values that the company has, and that they're donating 1% of profits back out to charities. Through each of these games. You can see each one is representing a different charity. They've also tried to create it, the components as sustainably as possible. Like in the flip and write game, there's no pens included because they say, everyone has pens at home and they don't want to contribute more plastic into the world. So that obviously is what we want to see from more progressive designers and from more progressive companies as we move forward. So that is really amazing, and they just look like super cute games that, I'm kind of sad that we don't have more kids in our life, because these look like perfect gateway games into more complex concepts. So you can have a mini style Biblios draft. I just love that. So if you do have children in your life, the games you can buy all 3 for 90 Australian dollars, which is really cheap. That must be somewhere between 20 and 25 US dollars each. So really quite cheap games that look like there will be nice gateways into more complex games for younger kids, as well as parents enjoying them as well. And the theme's so Australian. Absolutely adore. That is our number 1, the set of Joey games. So if you're still with us, thank you so much for watching this last fortnight. Apologies again that we're still in top 5 mode, because there just hasn't been enough campaigns, which is probably a good thing if you're out there saving money like we are, because there are, some board game conventions like Gen Con coming up, and then Essen after that, and we all know what that means, new game releases, and that means a lot more spending towards the end of the year. So save your pennies while you can, be fiscally responsible, and we'll
play
see
the games you have.
Play the games
if you can't be with the games you want, play the ones you have.
Get them off your shelf, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.